everyone. Welcome to the Food Safety and Preparation. So I'm today's presenter, Dr. Jessica Lin, and today I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know regarding food safety and preparation. So let's start. So here is to just give you a quick outline of what this course will cover for you. First of all, the most important thing is to know what is food safety and what is not safe for food, of course. And next, we are going to look at the common foodborne illnesses. I'll give you tons of examples so you can prevent those foodborne illnesses while you're working at your workplace or if you're just cooking delicious meals at home. Next, we'll also talk about a very crucial principles in food safety, which is the HACCP, H-A-C-C-P. And then we'll also cover what do you do from receiving the food to storing the food away. And next, we'll get some hands-on experience on the preparation and serving food. What are the things that you need to know while you're preparing your meals at home and while you're serving them at the dining table. And next, of course, we want to know how to prevent food poisoning because it's not just causing some discomfort. If it gets too serious, you can even end up in the hospital or facing death. So this is a quick outline of our course today, and we'll begin with a short quiz to know how much you guys already know. Just a quick introduction about myself. So I'm currently an instructor at National Taipei University of Nursing and Health Sciences, and I'm also a postdoctoral research fellow at Taipei Medical University. And my background is a clinical dietitian, so I used to work with patients in the hospital. And below is just my education and qualification. So enough about me. Now we'll start with a short quiz to test your knowledge. So let's begin with question 1. It's about thawing foods. So I'm sure we all have experience with trying to take out the food we store in the fridge the day before, and then we're trying to make some food with those frozen foods. So the question is, why not thawing food on the countertop? It looks very easy and it's quick. All I have to do is just put my overlap, take out the overlap from the fridge and then put them on my countertop for it to defrost. Why is it not okay? So I want you to think about this question. Question number 2 is about leftovers. So why do we cover leftovers in the refrigerators? Why not leave all the containers open? I'm sure this might sound very funny because most of us will have the lid, will cover the leftovers, but some people will not, and they will just leave the containers open. So I want you to think about why is the reason we need to cover up the food. And number 3 is about cooking ground beef. We all make pastas at home, right? I assume. So the question is, does cooking ground meat until it is no longer pink assure its safety? So does it sound right? Or I'm not too sure. I want you to think about it, okay? Question number 4, how do we organize your fridge? Trust me, a lot of people don't know how to organize their fridge. They think as long as there's still room in the fridge, I will shuffle all my food into that fridge. So poor fridge. That's not how you do it. So you want to learn the proper way of what kind of food you should put in each shelf. So we'll walk you through that during the presentation, and I guarantee you will find out so much more about, in terms of how you're organizing your food, and maybe you'll end up having extra space in your fridge if you store food properly. And the last question for you is condiments. So we all keep condiments at home, whether it's ketchup, it's pasta sauce, or it's mayonnaise, or it's hot sauce. So we all have those jars in our fridge. So what goes in the fridge versus what goes in the cupboard? So we don't always put everything in the fridge because otherwise it's going to explode. So some of the condiments we usually keep them in the cupboard. So do you know which one should go to the fridge and which one should go to the cupboard? We will also talk about that at the end of this presentation. So now you have those 5 questions in mind, and of course I want you to keep thinking about them as we go through our presentation. But first of all, I want to introduce you about what is food safety. So let's learn some definition. So the simplest definition for food safety refers to handling, preparing, and storing food in a way to best reduce the risk individuals become sick from foodborne illnesses. And the principles of food safety aim to prevent food from becoming contaminated and causing food poisoning. So, for example, the simplest way to prevent food poisoning is washing, whether it's washing your hands or it's washing the vegetables that you're going to eat. Or it can be properly storing your food at the right temperature. These are the things that you can do to make sure your food is safe. And if not, you'll end up with these little pictures here on the very right-hand side. If you consume food that are contaminated, then it's going to cause some symptoms. Usually it can be diarrhea, or it can be vomiting, nausea, or fever. It depends on what kind of bacteria that was contaminating your food. So we'll definitely learn the type of bacteria that are commonly found in different kind of food, and the symptoms associated when you consume something that's contaminated. And here are more definitions, of course. So there are some preliminary definition I want you to keep in mind as you will hear those words repetitively throughout the presentation. So first of all is the word clean. So what do we mean by the food is clean, the table is clean? It means it's free from soy, okay? And next is contamination. So which means the unintended presence of harmful substances or microorganisms in food or beverages. And the next term is a little bit different, but also has the word contamination. It is cross-contamination, which means allowing the harmful substances to come in contact with new products. So I'll give you a quick example. Say I use the toilet and afterwards I didn't wash my hands, and I go prepare the salads for lunch. Therefore, the not using the hands that I didn't wash to touch the raw vegetables, which is salads at this time, is an example of cross-contamination, because the germs found on my hand can be passed on to the vegetables that I'm preparing, so the fresh salads. And if a person eats the salad that I prepare for them, they can very likely get sick from the germs. So don't do that. Always wash your hands. And the next term is foodborne illnesses. So which is a disease that is carried or passed to human being by food. So it can go back to the example that I just gave you. That is a typical example of foodborne illnesses, because the germs found on my hand can pass on to the food, which is the salad at this time, and causing a foodborne illnesses. So hopefully by now you begin to learn about the definitions for food safety, and later we can strengthen the concept throughout the later slides. So then next, we'll go right on to learning about foodborne illnesses. Again, foodborne illnesses are usually infectious or toxic in nature, and they are caused by a lot of things. For example, bacteria, viruses, parasites, or chemical substance entering the body through contaminated food or water. Chemical contamination can lead to acute poisoning, for example, lead. Okay, so if you like to consume fish, then here's the question for you. Do you know if this type of fish contains a lot of heavy metal, for example, lead? And what type of fish would contain a lot of lead in their body? For example, tuna. That's one example for you. And later, of course, you can Google, um, for example, lead content in different type of fish, and then you will learn and try to avoid the type of fish that has higher lead or mercury levels. And chemical contamination can also lead to long-term diseases such as cancer. Foodborne disease may lead to long-lasting disability and death. So what do we mean by long-lasting disability? For example, if you have foodborne illnesses, sometimes it can lead to irritable bowel syndrome, meaning you have a combination of having diarrhea and constipation. So it's usually commonly known as IBS. I'm sure most of you have heard about this term. Another example is hemolytic uremic syndrome in children affected with E. coli 0157 H7 strain, or some neurological dysfunction caused by Listeria monocytogenes. So three bacteria that I just mentioned. Okay, so I mentioned actually two. I mentioned about the E. coli, which you will learn at later slides, and as well as a very commonly found bacteria called Listeria. So these are the long-lasting disabilities associated with foodborne diseases. And of course, I'll give you some examples of unsafe food. For example, if you didn't cook your food well, any types of animal origin that is not properly cooked can be a source of unsafe food. Fruits and vegetables contaminated with feces. So for example, if someone goes to the toilet and they did not wash their hands before they preparing the food, then there you go, that's a source of bacteria right there. And if you like to consume raw shellfish, or for example, raw fishes like sashimi, it may contain marine biotoxins. So these are the examples of unsafe food. Next, we'll get into the exciting part, which is learning about the common sources of food poisoning. So here I listed the common sources of food poisoning for you to learn. So number one is bacteria. Okay, and inside the bracket are the type of bacteria that can cause foodborne illnesses. For example, cholera, typhoid fever, brucellosis, tuberculosis. These are type of bacteria that you probably already heard about. The next is viruses. So rotaviruses, astroviruses, and noroviruses. I'm sure most of us are more familiar with noroviruses because they are usually happening at school, at the cafeteria, in the hospitals, or even just if you are eating out in the street vendors, those food carts, you can very easily get in contact with these type of viruses. Next on the list is parasites. So those include amoeba, amoeba, pinworm, and hookworm. Parasites are commonly found in raw fish. So, like I said, if you are a raw fish lover, you'd like to eat a lot of um, uh, sushis and with raw fish on top or sashimi by itself, then definitely be aware of the parasites. And they can live in your body for a very long time and they can cause a lot of problems. So try to avoid eating raw food if you can, as much as possible. And the next one on the list is chemicals. So, for example, some of the food additives like borax to serve as a food preservative, fluorescent brightener is usually used in food to make them to make a little adjustment in colors, make them whiter, and so, for example, maybe the bread, sometimes we use the fluorescent brighteners in the flowers, in the bread, or the food products to make them look appealing for consumers. And the next one is the formaldehyde. So these are just some of the examples for the chemical sources of food poisoning. Next, I want to introduce you a very important concept, which is called the temperature danger zone. So here you can see a thermometer being marked with different temperature. So I want you to take a note here is that we can categorize the different food zone based on its temperature. So at the very bottom, you have the frozen food zone. So at this zone, you can see usually bacteria cannot grow under negative 18 degrees Celsius. So if your freezer is properly kept at this temperature, then the food you store in the fridge, in the freezer, is considered to be safe as long as it doesn't pass the expiring date. And bacteria usually won't grow under this kind of severe cold temperature. And one layer on the, above the frozen food zone is what we call the cold food zone. So it's between 0 to 4 degrees Celsius. So usually that's the temperature we kept in our fridge. Okay, so now I want you to go to your fridge and actually check if the fridge temperature is being kept under 4 degrees Celsius. It's very important. Otherwise, there's no use to keep your food in the fridge if the fridge is not kept at the right temperature. So it's very important. Make sure you and your wife check the fridge temperature and make sure it's always kept under 4 degrees Celsius. And at the center, you will see, which is what I want to introduce to you, is the temperature danger zone, which is the temperature between 5 degrees Celsius to 6 degrees Celsius. And why do we say this temperature zone is dangerous? It's because bacteria love this living condition. Okay, they love the temperature between 5 degrees Celsius to 60 degrees Celsius. Most bacteria can grow in this temperature range. So make sure you don't just leave food on the counter or leave your leftovers on the dining table, because the bacteria can grow very quickly under these type of temperature. And on the very top of the thermometer, you have the hot food zone. So this is actually the cooking zone. Okay, so bacteria are usually destroyed at 100 degrees Celsius. Okay, that's why we say always cook your food until it's well done. Okay, never undercook your food. Okay, so on the left, is just the highlights of this thermometer. So the key points to remember are the temperature danger zone is between 5 to 6 degrees Celsius when it is easier for the harmful bacteria to grow in food. And then you want to minimize the time that the food spends at these temperature in order to keep food safe. So don't keep your food in the temperature danger zone. I cannot emphasize more, but please be careful. And like I said, your fridge, you should make sure your fridge is kept at temperature under 5 degrees Celsius or below. I usually keep mine at 4. So as long as you keep them at under 5 degrees Celsius, you're good. And next, last is the last point is hot food needs to be kept at 6 degrees Celsius or above, which is what we often say, keep the hot food hot. Okay, and before we move on to the next important concept called the heads up, I would like to take a short break and we'll come back to the heads up right away.